All right. Hey, thank you, Gary, for joining. Thank you, everyone. We are here and in our final stretch of the inaugural Higher Ed Technology Managers Alliance, or as Scott Tyner would say, In-House Integrator Alliance virtual conference. So we have made it. This has been a fantastic 3 days, and just having everybody. I think that's Tim. Oh, there he is. There we go. And thank you, everyone. This has just been fantastic. I love the conversation and the chat, and just everyone jumping in, and the messages that we've been getting with who can jump in as they can. And this is our opportunity to just continue that conversation. The chat went off every single session, so this is our opportunity to continue the conversations that we had. Again, some housekeeping for everyone. Do use the chat. There is a Q&A if you want to jump in that, or you can use the chat. Just make sure you put it to either all panelists or all panelists and attendees, so that you can continue the conversation and chime in. I will go really, really quickly because we've got a great moderator for this session to be able to go through the questions with us and just chime in too. And we're going to have him kind of give his little idea of the state of where we are in higher ed. But we'll go around and just have everyone just introduce themselves again one more time. So BC.
Yes, happy to be here. Happy to finally have made it to the finish line. Like I said, this has been a fantastic 3 days. So. If you haven't had a chance to attend one of the other sessions that I've been on, my name is BC Hatchett. I'm the Associate Director for AV Design and Support and Media Services at Vanderbilt University here in Nashville, Tennessee.
And Donovan.
Yeah, hi again. Thank you guys very much for putting this together, and it's been, I think, a great experience for all of us. So my name is Donovan from West Virginia University. I'm a network engineer.
And Mike.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be with you again. I am Mike Peterson. I am the Audiovisual Experience Manager at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa.
And one more time, really, really quickly, we have to use some minutes for this. Why are you wearing a tie?
I am wearing a tie as a part of Dress-Sember, something my college senior daughter roped me into, but I wear a tie every day for the month of December. She wears a dress every day for the month of December. We're raising awareness and money to fight against human trafficking and slavery.
Thank you for that. And Jim.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun the last couple of days. Jim Wellings, senior designer and programmer at Utah State University.
Excellent. And Tim. Welcome back. It's only been 15 minutes.
Yeah, Tim Van Wert. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for joining in. This has been a great event for everybody. I am the Senior Project Supervisor at Rutgers University within Digital Classroom Services.
Excellent. And Mr. Scott Tyner.
Hey, Joe, thanks. Scott Tyner from Bates College in Lewiston, Maine. And thanks to BC and Joe for putting this on. The only sad thing here is that we're just about done.
Yeah,
indeed.
Final stretch. Hey, and it's been good. This has been a throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And I think we had a lot stick. So and I'm really, really happy with this last person we are introducing because, of course, Scott, you write for Rave Pubs. And you were the very first person to say, what is this organization? And even put an article there about it. So it'd only be appropriate that we follow up from you to our moderator, Mr. Gary Kay. Thank you very much for joining. Of course, you are, whatever your title is, owner everything, Wizard of the Earth and Rave Pubs, but also on faculty at University of North Carolina. So thank you very much. But obviously introduce yourselves and also just yourself and tell us a little bit kind of your thoughts on where we are in higher ed and higher ed AV.
Well, first off, I want to apologize for my voice. I'm sure I sound terrible, but can you guys give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
We've got
Okay,
you.
good.
Yes.
I was sick last week, and then I had 3 days back-to-back of teaching and testing at the end of the semester here. So I've literally lost my voice. and I'm going to do the best I can to sort of yell talk into the into my microphone and my headset here. So I apologize for doing that. I'm first off honored to be here. I reached out to Joe. I was congratulating him on putting something like this together. This is awesome. This is something that I think your segment of the industry really needed badly and could benefit from. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Scott really hit it on the head when he said you're basically your own integration companies. Most of you, as you know, are smarter than your own local integrators. And I've written about that for years in Rave, in that, yeah, there's some great integration people out there, some great even installers that really know the gear really well, but it's not consistent across the board. So someone who's great doesn't mean the organization itself is great. And what I have found is that you guys are really representative of no other group in the industry, because you're a combination of integrators and rental companies all wrapped in one, because you're having to do on the fly projects that are like rental companies do, and sometimes even staging companies. When someone from your department says, hey, we want to do this small project, and the small project turns into miking 7 people and filling a room with image magnification. And oh, by the way, we want to stream it at the last minute, which is really a staging project. So there is no other end user like you. And really, I have advocated for years. I was on the Infocom, which was Avixa Infocom board for 4 years, and I advocated for having a special category for university AV professionals that would be equal to an integrator. Of course, they were against it at the time because the board was exclusively made up of integration companies. I was the only manufacturer representative at the time. It was an unusual thing that they allowed to have a manufacturer on the board back then. But really, you guys should be integrators. And as I said, I mean, our own in-house integration company here at UNC is better than most of the integrators in North Carolina, because they're dealing with a wider range of dynamic installations and dynamic customers than most of the AV companies are. So hats off to all of you for being able to do what you do with the very limited budgets and the upgrade cycles that are a year or two behind what they really should be. It's amazing what you're able to do. And I mean, I think a round of applause for your leader here, Joe, because Joe, for you to put this together is very forward thinking. I think you'll be emulated by other groups in the industry, because I think what you put together here is extremely forward thinking, and congratulations. So I wanted to open up with that. And again, I apologize for my voice, but I wanted Joe a chance for you to respond and tell me what you think about that idea that really you should be a different category in the show. And what I mean by a category in Avixa is that you should be treated differently as members and not have to pay the membership fees as an organization that integrators pay or that manufacturers pay. But also there should be for example, my idea was the show should be opened up early for your category, and you should be able to walk around the show 2 or 3 hours before or after everyone else and have one-on-one time with manufacturers that other companies don't get, because they're afraid to talk to you about pricing because they're afraid to upset an integrator, but yet they shouldn't treat you like an end user because of that capability. So Joe, I wanted to ask you what your opinion is of that.
You know, that is great. And no, thank you for that. And I do want to, and thank you for your thanks on this and the congrats, but I will definitely say that it's the whole committee and BC along the way, just pushing this and everyone jumping in and putting their panels together that made the success. I just happen to send Zoom invites out every month. That, you know, so thank you for that. I absolutely love the idea, because you're 100% right. We are a very, very unique section. And it's funny because, like, how do we get on the floor early? We have to go sign up for the Avixa, free tour, or the one that you run, and put the little headset on. But that's not really the show floor early. That's not getting the conversations ahead of time. We're still getting all of our, whether it be the Extrons, the Crestrons, the whatever. Obviously, Extron at UB Tech, Crestron at Infocom are, they're reaching out and saying, hey, come by and schedule a time with us. But we're just a slot on a calendar. but yet they're showing up to our campuses all year long. We need to be able to get in there and to be able to, even if it's maybe even the day before, right? Where maybe they're not fully set up, but who cares? We're used to seeing these things not set up. We can be able to walk in and say, you know, what are our needs? Let's see what you have, and let's have those conversations. Because the most valuable thing about an Infocom floor is the handshake, not the gear, right? The gear is what is, you know, what we're going to be looking at, but it's the relationship building. And once, you know, thousands of people hit the floor, you can't build the relationship. And, you know, so for them to be able to come in and say, yes, this is your own vertical. If you're part of it, it's 3 hours before, or maybe, you know, yeah, you start at 8 a.m., whatever time the floor opens, it's the first 3 hours, and maybe the first day they open a little later for everyone else. You know, you could find accommodations in that way. And I think it's great because we know that we are such a lucrative vertical for this industry, for the AV industry. And so just being able to have that.
And it's not just lucrative. You've influenced the industry. And I'll talk about that a little bit later because I can give you some personal feedback from when I was the VP of Sales and Marketing at Extron and at AMX. But your input is invaluable compared to most other end users. Most other end users, you sort of just listen to what they say and you let it go through because, you know, whether they're complaining or giving you an idea, it's not, many times it's not really well thought out. But in the case of the university community, it is very well thought out, more than any other end user. And I'm not just tooting your horn, I've lived it. In addition, the content, just even on the writing side, the content that we get from your group is at a different level when you're writing about the experience that an end user has. Now, let me continue that with my own experience. I was in a meeting with the whole University of North Carolina, all of the AV departments, and we're kind of in a unique time that I think a lot of you are also in. We have professional schools. We have 6 professional schools, schools of medicine, law school, pharmacy, that kind of business school. We have 6 or 7 of those. And then we have tons of departments. The schools all have their own AV department, and the departments share a larger IT AV infrastructure with some of the larger departments having an in-house AV person, but they all report back to the university AV department, which is still under the IT department now. We got them all together, all at one time, and I spoke to all of them. And one of the people there mentioned something to me that I hadn't thought of. I may be the only person in the entire AV university community who's been a user of AV in the university community and came from the AV business for as long as I have. So I've been in the AV business 30 years, and I'm not an AV tech like you, and I don't have the AV intimate knowledge of the technology you do, but I'm actually a user. I've been teaching for 10 years. So I have a very interesting perspective, and because I kind of know the behind the scenes and the struggles that a professor goes through that to make things work at the very last minute, while also trying to figure out, is this cockpit error or is there actually a problem here? And so therefore, I think my perspective is interesting, and here's what I've come back with. And pardon my language, everything's too freaking complicated. Everything is too freaking complicated. Even Extron, and I come back to, I felt like at Extron, I did a really good job dumbing things down and simplifying the interface and making it where you didn't have to have custom programming and making products that you could connect to everyone else's products and make work. I celebrated that success and I'm proud of it. But even after all of that, it was still too complicated. Our industry now, jumping forward 10 years now to where we are today, still too complicated. Thank God for Zoom, because Zoom has shown us the light. Zoom has literally shown us the light. They've said literally, oh, you think you can't make it simple? Let us show you you're wrong. And they scared the shit out of Cisco. And so much so that Polycom basically said, we give up. We're out of the video conferencing industry. We're in the video peripherals industry. And basically Zoom has said, here's the right way to do it. Now they're the bar. They're sort of like the Uber of our industry. Like for the last 5 years, everyone that went into an app said, we're the Uber of this. We're the Uber of home delivery. We're the Uber of maid services. Now going forward, everyone's going to start saying, we're the Zoom of this. We're the Zoom of that in our industry. And I think that the best way to support that is for your community to endorse products. So I'm going to put a call out for you to have an, for lack of a better term, a HETMA endorsement program that be on your radar, that you basically go in and endorse products that meet your standard of performance, efficiency, and simplicity, because those are three different things. Yep. They need to work. They need to work the way that they respect the work, meaning they told us they were going to work, and they need to work simple enough that a 60-year-old professor who comes in with paper can figure out how to use a room just as easily as a 25-year-old a person who just graduated who uses everything and can figure everything out on their own. So I challenge you to use your power to come in and say, we're not taking this shit anymore. We want to simplify this market. And if you don't work with us, we're not working with you. And if they don't find a way to do what Extron and Crestron and other companies have done in giving you access to their products before the show, because I know Crestron has an offsite event, Extron has an offsite event, I don't think you should support them. I don't know that you guys can go as far as to demand that the show have extra hours, but you can certainly demand companies you're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with, support your ability to have one-on-one time with them off the show floor. So that's what I have to say.
Welcome to our new HETMA spokesperson.
Well, one of the things I'd like to expand that even further, and this kind of goes.
And by the way, I'm going to go grab some water, but I'm still listening.
Yep. I'd like to expand that a little further, based upon our conversations that really many of us work as in-house integrators. It is a little frustrating to me how few of these manufacturers will sell direct to me. A lot of these are requiring us to buy through distribution and not selling to us directly. So one of the things I'd like to continue to advocate for here too is because, again, based upon that high praise from Gary, we're full up integrators. We're probably better than some other integrators in the marketplace. Why can't we get a direct sales model as real integrators, just working in-house in our own institutions?
Right.
So I love that. I'm going to make one suggestion. I agree with you. I do agree with you. But I would not start with that. I would not lead with give us direct sales. I would say start with wielding your power. As we are HETMA, we are a united group, and we are going to start endorsing products, HETMA certified.
Yeah.
And then like baby steps, like make that a 3-year goal without publishing that. Like don't put that in an article, Scott. But I agree with you, because I think first step is let them see your power. Second step is help them fix their problems. Third step is reward us.
That's great. And those of you who were at CCUMC
on that.
Those who were at CCUMC remember during our thing there at CCUMC, our design thinking with the manufacturers, and that was the thing I stood up and said, what do you wish the manufacturer do? Sell direct. And it was like in drop in the room.
Yeah, but I mean, Mike brings up a great point. There's so many of us that have our own teams that do such a great job on installing, and we're hamstringed by, we only sell to integrators. It's like, well, yeah, we are though. Like we're that special use case where yes, we are the end user, but yeah, we're also the installer. So it's like we have both hands in the pot, as it were.
even just having pricing available to us. Some manufacturers are really good about that. And like I mentioned, Crestron and Extron, we could actually log in and get those prices. There are so many manufacturers who will not ever even tell you a list price. And it's very frustrating trying to do a budget.
Buy amp.
Gesundheit.
So what is, yeah, and also I just put a call out. If anyone has any questions, drop them in the chat there as well, and what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about AV over IP when we get a chance, because I have some thoughts on that, and I'd love to give your feedback on that.
Let's go with it. I know that a couple of the panelists here were on that that session. What are those thoughts?
So AV over IP is still an emerging market. If you're not in the business, if you're not right now integrating AV over IP, you're not behind. This is a brand new thing. And what I would encourage the university community to do is not one-off it, ONE-OFF. Don't one-off it. You need to think about it as an ecosystem on your campus, not just let's replace this room with an AV over IP room and then do another room with an AV over IP room. And so you need to think about it as an ecosystem, because this really has some huge ramifications for content delivery, simplification, and workflow change. And we can get into each one of those because they're different things. But the market is still emerging. There is no standard. There won't be a standard. I can tell you there won't be a standard, meaning you're not going to get all the manufacturers to agree. And it probably wouldn't be a good idea that they all agree on one standard, because each of the own standards that are out there or options that are out there have limitations, that if you only had one option, you'd be stuck with the limitations. Whereas if you have a couple of options, you can work around the limitations. So I'd be a little concerned with like SDVOE being adopted as a standard, or for that matter, any of them, because of those limitations. And then third is, if you haven't installed AV over IP yet, it's perfectly fine. But you should, before you do, get educated really carefully on the way that SDVOE works, the way that NVX works, the way that SVSI works, and the way that Extron works, because they are 4 totally different theories in AV over IP distribution. They're not the same. The closest are SDVOE and Extron. The way that NVX and SVSI and SDVOE are very different, and so on and so forth. But Extron and SDVOE aren't compatible. So even though they're close, they're not interoperable, I guess is a better term. So I know that there was a lot of talk about that, and I know that the stat was somewhere between 10 and 15% of you have done some AV over IP, and I think it's great to play around with it. But be careful of not considering it an ecosystem, very much like how you connect printers onto the network campus-wide. To me, it's very similar, because you had to put all these printers around, and then you had to think, how are the students going to access them and print it out? How are the professors going to access print out? And by the way, how do we charge everybody to do it? I mean, we can't just make them freely available. It's like that, more so than it is like putting a computer on the network. It's more like how you did printer configuration than how you just stuck a computer on the network, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Jim.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So our first AV over IP project was an entire building, new construction. And that was kind of a jump in with both feet kind of way to do it. But we did plan for that quite a bit ahead of time. We had several months to have the network people look at the hardware, see what it would do to the network. And we're already talking about, as we go through and they do planned upgrades to the university network, are we going to plan for this, and are we going to consider transporting high bandwidth AV over the network between buildings, something we're not doing yet. So it's for sure a huge interconnected project, and don't ignore the IT people while you're doing this.
Yep. And I think that's what we're looking at that over summer. We're going to do, I think I mentioned this before, we're doing 250 spaces, and we're looking at doing it in that way over summer. And because we're a federated model, I might be doing one room in one building, right? And then having to have another room in another building, but I want to try to connect them. So that's going to be a project in itself. But I love what you said about keeping it as, you know, an ecosystem and looking at it. It's not just the different way, because there's no need to go to AV over IP if you're just doing it within one single room. You might as well just keep what you've got, right? But once you think of all the possibilities of, once it's on a network, what are all the possibilities that can happen with that? And I think that's kind of the way we're looking at it.
Yeah, we're doing it as our as building projects come up. So we had a renovation in our School of Medicine area where it made sense to do an AV over IP solution. So we did that in there. A lot of unique challenges in that space because all of the equipment lives within the modular walls and rack space. There are no central podiums in each space. So that was a pretty interesting project to work on. And as we roll out our School of Education, that's 3 buildings. That's going to all be AV over IP. We're getting ready to look at an overall of our business school, you know, building a whole new floor onto a 3-story building. That's going to all be AV over IP. It allows us to kind of control the, like you were saying, it allows us to control the environment and also make sure that we're not overwhelming the IT requirements that are needed to make it a successful deployment.
By the way, someone just, I just saw flyby in the comments that they turn off HDCP because of all the HDCP issues in a room. We tried that. The problem is when you try to stream, then you can't capture any of the HDCP content. Have you come up with a solution? Has anyone come up with a way around that? Because when you're using a streaming box, so let's say, and what I mean by that is I record all my lectures and then post all the lectures in a Facebook group so the students can watch it, because I'm not a big believer in forcing everyone to come to class. If my lectures are interesting enough, they're going to come to class. But if they're sick, if there's a problem, they're an athlete and they have to go play a basketball game somewhere, then I need to make the lecture available. When we turn off HDCP, whenever I bring in HDCP content, like a graduation speech or a scene from Black Mirror that I'm talking about in relation to the class, that content goes green on the recording. So I don't know if turning off HDCP is the solution to a room. And I know this has nothing to do with what we were just talking about, but it just flew by on there. And I don't necessarily think that's the best solution because it hampers the content from a delivery standpoint.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not. And that was my comment to another person who had asked that about Apple devices. And we are a huge Apple campus. Our solution is a workaround. It's not a solution. I agree with that. But because all of our lecture capture and everything that we do content-wise is done through our PCs and our classrooms, we don't have that same issue with that. So that's where we get around that. With the Apple and iOS devices, we're using either Solstice apps on our PCs for wireless connectivity, or we're plugging them into our DMPSs with HDCP turned off, and all of our lecture capture is done through the PC. Our streaming is done through the PC using Zoom and an Amp Media server that we have here. So all that is taken care of on the back end. It is not a solution. It is a workaround. I will say that.
I was saying I have another workaround. I've used Kramer scalers to kind of strip it out and then pop it right back in if I'm running content through a codec. So it's a little bit of a dirty workaround, but
quiet.
I'm reporting you to HDMI LLC as we speak.
And also I brought in, so it was Raul's question, and he welcome to the show, Raul. So I pulled you in, and so what was your comment on that?
Thank you, guys. So yeah, this is Raul Burriel at Oregon State University. We've been looking at this HDCP issue for years now. It's, I think, an issue that everyone's been struggling with for years, and there is no good solution. And arguably, the issue is largely in the context of Apple devices, and frankly, Apple's own unique implementation of things, because they are Apple. In fact, UW was here just last month for a Crash on A+ thing, and we had dinner with them, and we were talking about lecture capture, and they said, just don't ask me about HTCP. The following day, we were actually having the A+ meeting, and I brought up HTCP, and they gave me these dirty looks across the table. What we are seeing ultimately is, say, with a Windows device, and in the context of recording, lecture capture, professional recordings and so forth, we can feed Windows content through an HDMI cable with HTTP in copy protection just fine, and then say something copyrighted comes on. If someone hits play on a Netflix video or what have you, that content gets blocked out. So yes, in the example of, say, like Black Mirror or something, you want to use that in your class environment, that's fine to the point until you try to record it, and then HTTP flag says, no, you can't record that. Okay, fair enough, that's what the HTTP flag is supposed to do. Apple devices don't work that way. Apple devices flag content universally. They don't look at what's coming through. They say, we don't know what content you're playing, so if you're going to record, we're just not going to record the video. We, by and large, oftentimes, when someone comes into the classroom with a MacBook or an iPad and they use that as their teaching device, end up with audio and black, audio and no picture. And it's not like this is a mystery. I have knowledge-based articles from universities across the world where they say, oh, but if you want to use our system for lecture capture, and it could be a Panopto system or a media site system or what have you, use the VGA connector. They're essentially telling you to use the analog hole. The problem is multifold here, in the sense that a lot of our switchers no longer have VGA outs, or VGA, of course, is not as high a resolution as the HDMI, but the vendors, MediaSite, Panopto, are telling you use the analog hole, which is quickly closing. So I bring this up to our Apple engineer, and they're like, what? I didn't know this was happening, which is weird. And you know, after a little bit back and forth, they come back to me with a couple of links to these mystery little black boxes at Amazon that you could buy from China, which apparently you could strip out HDCP. It's like, no, these are not devices that we can deploy on our campus and support reliably. And so in the end, essentially, Apple is telling us, like, yeah, you're not going to be able to record content if the person is using an Apple device. But that's not something we can tell our professors. We can't tell them, don't buy a MacBook, because we can't support it. And so essentially, we are between a rock and a hard place. There is no solution that I know of right now, short of essentially stripping HTTP from the video feed, which is not really a solution at all.
Yeah, so what I've been doing is I've been... where that blank part is, I go in and I tell them what to go watch, like tell them the time code and what to go watch. And it's really the only workaround, because what Apple's doing is technically following the law, basically following the rules. They're doing it the right way. Everyone else has sort of bent the rules a little bit, because they know, well, they weren't, the intention of the law or the rule was one thing versus the actual rule. The intention was not to worry about encrypting HDMI, a PowerPoint presentation coming out of an HDMI connector, but it was to protect a, copyrighted content. Well, the way that people get around that is by doing exactly what you just said, Raul, is being okay with PowerPoint coming out of an HDMI, but then I can get smart and stick that scene from Black Mirror inside my PowerPoint presentation and drive it. And Apple's like, well, we don't want to take the risk. Our relationship with Hollywood is too important. So they're doing an all or nothing kind of thing. So technically Apple's following the rule. I think that Apple made a statement earlier this year that is interesting. They said basically, and I'm going to paraphrase it, we've decided to pay attention to the enterprise market. That's basically what they said. We're only concerned with the consumer. I don't know if you caught that. It was in one of their conference calls, earnings calls earlier this year. And then Tim Cook mentioned it again in his launch in June. So our Apple sources are telling us that sometime in 2020, we're going to see Apple differentiate between products going into commercial applications and products going into consumer applications. So I believe that Apple TV would be a good example of that, where they'll have, when you put it into the commercial mode, they'll have workarounds for stuff like this. But the problem that you're describing is universal. Everyone's experiencing it. So I just saw it fly by and I thought it would be worth addressing.
Yeah, no, that's great. Hey, thank you so much, Raul. And by the way, if anyone has not looked up there at Oregon State, the classrooms in the round, they're fantastic. So there's a plug out for Oregon State University. Hey, thank you so much. I feel like I want to keep taking callers.
Hey,
Next caller.
So one other thing I wanted to bring up is about AV as a service. Ultimately,
Dun, 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 dun.
a comment was made. A comment was made in an earlier session about, like, why should we pay for AV as a service when basically we'd be like double dipping ourselves for money. And you're exactly right. I mean, the platforms that are out there for AV as a service, you should be able to deploy yourself, like Domo to whoever you want to deploy, or use Crestron or Extron or whoever. But you should consider sort of like the model for managing equipment is where you really should be paying attention to, not buying equipment or leasing equipment through a model like that, because the university, at least our case at UNC, we don't have a category for that. Like if somebody wanted to rent us something, that category doesn't even exist. Like we can't bring something in on a rental because it's not a chair or a table. Like it doesn't exist for a 3-year deal or a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal. We had the idea of, instead of having computer labs rotating laptops through, instead of having fixed computer labs, and we're having to figure out how to work with the accounting department at UNC to account for those, because Apple does have a university rental program, as you know, where you can rent, say, 20, 30, 40 computers at a time and refresh them every single year. But the university didn't have a way for accounting for that. So it's going to be very difficult for you to even consider that. But the byproduct of AV as a service, the value is the management of the product on the university side, not the hardware side. The platforms for managing the equipment will emerge to be very helpful for you, I believe.
Do you think those are things that are there now, or they,
No. No,
so
they're not there. Yeah.
So you don't consider GBE or XIO along those lines yet, or not?
Yes, as in their own little worlds, yes. But when you go outside of the need for managing stuff outside of that, that's where it becomes problematic. And then plugging that into the IT infrastructure, that's where it becomes problematic. So I know that some of you have done great implementations of that, but I think that if you hang in there, in 2020, you're going to see a lot more opportunities out there to simplify that and make it cross-compatible with all the IT products that are out there right now. Because in a way, those products are awesome, but they're reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, I know there are some integrators like Symphony with AVIs, but they're kind of claiming that that's what that does. And I don't have personal experience with it, but is it that the direction that you think something could be useful for us?
Not for the university community, but for a normal end user, absolutely. I think, Mike, you're exactly right. The future should be you're buying direct. I think it was Mike that said that first. You should be buying direct. And in a way, I guess you could threaten it. Say, look, if you don't sell to me direct, I'm going to start buying everything through CDW. But even then, you're paying more money. You're paying too much money for it. Really, remember. Well, actually, the program Epson has, the Bright Futures program that they have where K through 12 combined, that's like a good model for how other companies should be providing buying direct. Like if you're not going to sell to me direct, at least tell me the price that I'm getting discounted and I'm just moving the gear through the integrator, rewarding them for being, for having a front door, but I'm going to manage the equipment myself.
Well, Gary, truth be told, these departmental spaces that we have that aren't kind of centrally funded from our university, they're already doing that. They're already going through our procurement system, buying a cheap flat panel from one of the existing vendors, and then just doing a hang and bang job on the wall. And then inevitably we get the call whenever something goes wrong. So it plays into our bettering our service model if we're able to actually vet and bring in this equipment without having to worry about or rely on external vendors.
And if you could provide data that supported that to the manufacturers, like here's the percentage that were installed by integrators, here's the amount of time you had to spend supporting it, and here's our fix. Why would you continue this model when you can deal directly with us and not have the support issues?
Right. Well, actually, data. And speaking to data, actually capture the entire spend as opposed to knowing I'm spending this out of this bucket or this out of this bucket, not knowing what the other departments are doing. We'll actually be able to get an accurate count on what the spend is across the enterprise on AV equipment.
Here's one thing that we have to keep in mind. Like I've been in this industry for 30 years. I started in this industry in 1988. Back in 1989, 90, 2000, for those of you who are 89, 90, 91, 92, how many of you been in the industry that long? Nobody? I'm sure somebody's got, okay. We've had to make up terms to describe things, meaning they didn't exist. Like we made up the term computer-video interface. And then I called Emery Cesar and said, from COVID, and I said, would you guys use this term too, so that we could have at least the same terminology for products? Like it was literally like that because we felt like it was going to be too complicated if we called it something and COVID called it something else. So the point is our market is evolving. So we were very much an immature market. The last 10 years, we've gone through a lot of maturity. I would love to have been at a manufacturer over the last 10 years because I could have helped them mature a lot quicker. I've been fortunate enough to help some of the great companies that are out there as clients, companies like LG and Epson, Extron, and companies like that as well that have been great clients of ours. But even they're not, and nothing's perfect. But I do think we're going to see a great evolution over the next couple of years that'll be exponentially quicker in professionalism than what we've had in the past.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right. I'll still make the call out for more for questions that people have based on our conversations here. But I think, and going off what James dropped something in here. What do you think about software defined, or anyone thinks, because software defined platforms, I guess that'd be closest to SDVOE or utilities, those types of things, as far as looking at that at an enterprise level. Is that something that we should be looking at?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you might want to bring James in here. I think what he may be referring to is what we were just referring to, like the management systems that Crestron and Extron and companies like that have created to manage AV gear. But I could be wrong, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll bring James. I'll bring him in. I know James is with Utiligy. Let's see. James, where are you at? He might have dropped off. I don't see him. All right. Well, then there you go.
And run away.
Yep.
Drop and run. All right. There you go.
He says he's in, but it's interesting. I don't see him on the list either. Oh, he's got his hand raised. It's at the top of the list.
It jumps to the top. There we go. Allow to talk. There we go. James, you're back in. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to say, always I'm grateful to be able to speak with, experts like you, and as much as, we bring new value to the table, I'm also learning with everything I'm hearing here. I think Gary made a very good point about, when you mentioned platform, a platform like, a software-defined AV from Utology, we look at things like we're promoting a wide open ecosystem where all manufacturers are playing nice along with each other, and not only managing our own devices, but, everything throughout the enterprise from a single pane of glass. And it's really hard to do when it's relying on a single box. So it has to be, whether it's Utology or another company like Utology, where a server-based application allows you to provide a platform that can do all of these things that is being discussed. And Gary actually has at University of North Carolina, we have a few installs there, and you probably have some experience. I don't know if you've been working with Jokia and have learned about what our platform have done. Has that made a difference?
Well, I don't really want to talk about specific companies and products specifically, but I see where he's coming from. The systems that, like, for example, obviously I'm biased because I have some personal experience with sort of the way that Extron has done product management on with their platforms, and I think of course I think theirs is one of the best, if not the best, that's out there as far as connectivity and universal compatibility and interfacing. But I think that what James is trying to say is that in the future, as we move more towards putting all this in the cloud, rather it being premise-based or server-based or wherever it might be, that we have to rethink the way that we're doing not just signal routing and distribution, but also management. My point was not necessarily, although I agree with a lot what James is saying. My point was that having multiple systems on a campus to manage the same sets of gear in a room is the complication. It's not that they don't work well. I think that all the systems that are out there work really well. And like, for example, we use Extron here and it works really well. But we also have a different system that manages the printers because they're charging as people print. We have a different system that manages connecting Apple TVs to the network, and a totally different system that manages connecting laptops to the network. And you're dialing in the different systems to add them to the network and assign them to the proper student ID or office or room. That's the complication I'm talking about. I'm talking about making all that universally compatible.
Yeah.
I apologize if that was not understood well.
And I agree, because I even think, look at us, like with us, we're a federated model. So if I want to support rooms that might have been done by one integrator and they're a Crestron integrator and that is their platform of choice, and we had someone else with Extron, now I've got to shoot up a Fusion server, I've got to shoot up a GVE server. You're right, with our print management, we actually do oversee student printing for our library, so we oversee the main help desk. So I'm managing that. I'm managing all these different things. So yeah, maybe something where we can have a managed, I cannot believe I'm saying this, people are not allowed to quote me, but if we did have some type of managed service platform where we could, I don't know if it's an umbrella that lives over all the others or whatever, or hopefully in time, get rid of all of them and have one that can just be able to control everything, especially as they're all IP based in one spot. I think that's huge.
And that's what I'm saying you're going to see in 2020. I think you're going to see more seamless compatibility with some of the standard IT products that are out there based on your organization. So like, for example, if you're a Mac-based campus, you have a different set of needs than if you're mostly a Windows-based campus. If your campus connects the buildings together versus if it's standalone, you have different needs. Because they're managed. Look, I mean, I don't know how every campus is managed. I know in our case, we have our School of Media and Journalism, and then we have the medical school, and even though we know them, we're not connected. It's not like I can send my content to them and they can send their content to us. not only do we not have the physical ability to do that, but we're dealing with just FERPA. They're dealing with HEPA and FERPA. Those are two totally different things that make it even more complicated to do a universal management platform, which we haven't even talked about yet. But do you understand where I'm coming from there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, and this is kind of interesting because Donovan, you're with the med school, right? So do you have those concerns?
Absolutely. I mean, HIPAA compliancy is, kind of where you have to start when you talk about, whether you're supporting classroom work and the standard classes or things like grand rounds for residents in hospital. And, is it a surgery we're broadcasting so kids can watch that? Is it, even in our telemedicine deployment, when we're talking about, because we're also the UCC shop, we're supporting telemedicine as well. So yeah, I mean, the HIPAA compliancy thing is a huge thing for us that the other part of the campus, the main campus, doesn't have to deal with. So,
yeah, our medical school can't even, you tell me if this is the same with you. Like in my case, I went to, I said, hey, I have an idea. I want to start recording all of my lectures and I want to be able to put them on Facebook Live because I think it'll simplify it for my kids. And then the next class, we had it up and running because we already had the cameras in there. We just had to reconfigure the SMPs in the classroom. We use Extron SMPs. And in your case, you can't even do that. Like you can't just record any lecture because a lot of times you're talking about case studies of patients.
Well, we actually, it's a requirement here at this school that every class be lecture captured because everything is being watched after the fact. So,
and how do you deal with that with HIPAA when you're talking about
everything is
stuff?
It's most of it is housed here, so it doesn't leave. It's an internal resource. They're not supposed, most things are supposed to be de-identified, but we know that, things slip and those kind of things, especially in broader terms of grand rounds and those kinds of things. Sometimes when you're presenting your case, those things become difficult. But for the most part, the regular classwork and those kind of things, there's not much patient information, but we do keep everything here in house. So we're not going, it's not, everything has to be breached internally. But for, that's a requirement for us that the main campus doesn't have. They don't have lecture capture as much as we do. And they don't have to deal with especially with those kind of security applications that we do. And that becomes a big issue, not only for our classrooms, but for our wireless networking and for everything else that goes into what we do as a working teaching hospital. So it's a completely different set of AV requirements than you would for a business school or for an ag school or anything like that.
So I know we had some other topics that were very, very popular too. I would still like to call out for people being in there. But also just curious, even just with like Scott, because we talked about during your, when we did the AV as a service and we used your school or something that might resemble your school as, the test bed. But is this conversation changing? Like, listening to this? Is it even
yeah, because I think, and one of the comments during yesterday's session was, it's a terminology thing we're getting stuck on, right? And we keep using as a service, and maybe we need to talk more about hybrid model. And so they compared it, the person that made the comment, it was great, and I've been thinking about it a lot, to when you talk about network in the cloud or infrastructure in the cloud. Obviously somebody is still here putting network drops in your building and you still need that connection, but you move a lot of that other stuff to the cloud. And so what is that line? And so it's not a question of does everything go away and is it AV as a service, but it's where do we manage some of these things and where do we stay like we always have?
I don't want to be convinced otherwise, but I think I'm being convinced otherwise, that there are opportunities out there.
Well, and you can still continue with your T-shirt, Joe, and just not call it AV as a service. We'll just call it something different.
I still think AV as a service still needs to make up its mind. What is AV as a service?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's brand new. I mean, people have been writing about it for 3 or 4 years, but no one's really packaged it together yet. So it really remains to be seen what it's ultimately going to be. I did a webinar on it. I don't know if any of y'all attended the webinar where I kind of went through the steps that AV as a service has to go through and where it is today. And right now it's on like step 1.5. So it's you're talking about something that's even more in its infancy than AV over IP.
And I think it's a great place where, again, as Gary had mentioned, as in-house integrators in higher ed, we have this unique place because a lot of people are talking about metrics and measuring things and knowing things, how things are used, and managing them remotely. And I think we are ahead of the game on that, right? I mean, we've been doing using these tools from the manufacturers for a while. We've all got some little tricks on making things work, on how to receive help calls, on measuring what we do, fixing it based on the metrics that we've got. So I think, again, there's a place where integrators, manufacturers can learn from us and what we've already done.
Yeah,
listen,
I 100% agree.
I was thinking a lot about this last night, especially after our conversation yesterday. And I think for us, and I think I'm not the only one on even on this panel, that we use our integrators kind of like, you know, I do my box sales through, I mean, full disclosure, I do my box sales through AV ISPL, and the salesperson from them, who I like very, very much, you know, says, hey, you know, is there anything you guys want to look at? We meet at Infocom. We hang out there together. He says, hey, you guys want to try this out? I'll get you a demo of it, you know, and in return, I do my box sales with him. But we also don't use them for, you know, for our classroom installs. We don't have them, you know, their techs aren't down here for those things. We're doing those things internally. So I think that there's still that great relationship with, you know, the vendor and having those people be part of what we do daily. But I think we have to change what, you know, for us, at least here at WVU, we have changed how we do things enough that we're not relying on them for our day-to-day services. We're reliant on that, and we're using them just as, you know, we're buying from them. They're helping us out, look at new gear, and offering us support when we need it.
Yeah, and I will say this. There are some incredible integrators out there. If you take a look at the top 4 integrators that you know off the top of your head, you know, the big 4, that's some of the best talent we have in the industry. But there's also some really good talent. And many of you came from integrators, right? Where you that's how you learn the business. So I think like if higher education went away from the integration community, it's not even going to be really a big hit on the integration community. I mean, y'all are awesome, but you're not, it's not like you're 10% of the business. I mean, you're a very small portion of the business. And you're kind of in a unique position because, for example, the very first AV over IP install in the world was a university. The very first 4K projector installed in the world was a university. The first install with 4K monitors was at a university. So the fact of the matter is, you guys are the ones willing to take a gamble and be beta testers for all this shit all the time. So you know, you're more of that than you are a giant chunk of the business. The integrators ultimately, just like what you just said, Donovan, they're going to survive with or without you based on the relationships that they have with you. Because if they're solving a problem and they're getting you equipment and they're still able to provide you an expertise and they're still able to provide you some nugget of information you can't get otherwise, you should reward them by purchasing through them. My point was, there's a lot of cases around the country, ourselves included, where we're doing all the work. And in the case where we're doing all the work, we need a simplified track to get the equipment in here so that we can just get the work done. Because our limitation window is a better term for getting the work done is like 2 months a year. Sometimes we have like 1 week windows here and there, but if anyone slips up in those 2 months, we're screwed. We're basically not able to use a classroom for 3 weeks at the beginning of the year. I just don't want another element to be that barrier to getting that stuff done. So I'm not anti-integrator by any means. In fact, we have integrators that are clients of ours, and they say the same thing. A lot of them learn new ways to do things and about new technology from you walking the show floor at InfoComm, which I think is ironic. So I think y'all can live synergistically. I was just saying at the very beginning that I'm a big supporter of you being treated differently by the community of the AV industry, and at a minimum, you should have your own few hours at the show. That's the very first thing you should start with.
I completely agree. And if there was a direct buy model, maybe I'm not having this conversation. Maybe I'm not thinking about this the same way, since there isn't, and I am buying through a reseller, it is nice to have that relationship with somebody who I can call and say, hey, I want to try this piece of gear. Can I get it? Because that's the only way I'm getting it here right now.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you.
One quick question is I hear you hear people talking about they learn from us at show floors, that we're our own integrators. I know there's a conversation on Twitter recently. Gary, you've been to all of them. What do you think about tech managers in the United States or in-house integrators in the United States traveling to ISE, sorry. You know, Joe looked into it. He thinks he may be able to do it potentially cheaper than some of us could get to InfoComm. What do you think? Is it worth it, or is that too international of a show for us?
It's not too international of a show. The show is like a giant version of InfoComm that also has CDA attached to it. So it's, interestingly enough, as much as InfoComm's, Vix is probably not going to be happy with me saying this, the timing of ISE is better for the university community than the timing of InfoComm, which I have told Avixa. I had this conversation with the new exhibitions manager who just came aboard. She's awesome, by the way. And I think she's going to be open to some of these ideas, because you see stuff at ISE, you can order it and get it installed over the summer. When you see something at InfoComm, the summer's already started. The soonest you can get that installed would be the Christmas break, assuming you can get people to work over that break, or the holiday break, at the end of your holiday break. And then you have to wait till the next summer. In some cases, that doesn't matter because the equipment doesn't ship for 6-8 months anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, not to mention anything you see at InfoComm, like, yeah, that's going to ship Q1, right, maybe Q2.
But
yeah, exactly.
But let me get back to something else that is totally different. The manufacturers that have big booths at InfoComm, their booths are way bigger at ISE. So they're bringing a larger range of their product to ISE. And then you have an additional 300 manufacturers that don't exist, of which 250 of them you don't care about. 50 of them are sort of golden nuggets for you that you may not have seen, most of which are in and around the digital signage industry. So there's companies that are doing really innovative stuff in digital signage that are at ISE, because the digital signage market in Europe is more mature than it is in the United States. So my answer would be, I would not do ISE instead of InfoComm, but if you can find a way to get to ISE, you're going to get a tremendous amount of value out of the show. I would not trade ISE for InfoComm if you're based in the United States. By the way, if any of you want to go to ISE and we can help you, I mean, we stay at a hotel at Amsterdam. We've done it every year. You're welcome to stay at our hotel with us. We also have a production suite there where you can store your bags and come and hang out with us. We'd love to host any of y'all. We have high-speed internet access in our production suite. We have availability of off hours internet. I teach my class from there, so obviously we have very high-speed ability to stay connected to the home base.
Hey, it's a party at ISE on Gary.
It's not a party. I will tell you, it's not a party.
It's all work.
That shows a lot of work. We get to the show floor at 7 a.m. and we don't leave until 1 or 2 in the morning. So we don't sleep very much during those 4 days. but we output a tremendous amount of awesome content, I think.
I've been one time, and I just have to say it is, for a first timer, just simply overwhelming. The RAI is enormous.
Yeah, it's a big venue. This will be our last year at that venue. We moved to Spain in 2021.
I know we're kind of closing up on time, but I did want to, because it was a huge chat. The chat went off yesterday on esports. So I'm actually kind of interested in, Gary, your take. I mean, obviously the one area we didn't really talk on was a lot of the tangibles of like how we actually are going to pull that off. Because we all learned yesterday that it's here, it's big. And if we're not paying attention to it, this is, and owning it, there's a huge loss. So,
well, ironically, my class last year, my class project for my class was to work with Epic Games to create a collegiate tournament using Fortnite. Epic Games is down the road from us here in Cary, North Carolina, and they're the ones that created Fortnite. And we actually created the concept for them to do a collegiate tournament aimed at esports teams. As you know, there's about 8 or 10 varsity level esports teams around the country that are like Ohio State, Florida, Texas. I forget off the top of my head. I don't know who all the universities are. There's only one in the ACC. But obviously, the reason why universities are going to embrace esports is that it's more inclusive as a sport. Like, it's the most inclusive sport that is probably on the planet right now. As far as new sports, emerging sports, it's more inclusive. And sort of, you don't have to be an uber athlete when you start. You can kind of be a gamer and become sort of famous in that world. And there's a lot of money. Let me repeat that last one. There's a lot of money. Yeah. So ESPN is starting their own esports network. That's going to drive universities to start esports teams. Technologically, latency is going to be an issue. You can't use systems that have visual latency, meaning noticeable latency, because the latency issues will be noticeable by gamers that you wouldn't notice. We would not notice as old people. So therefore, when you're talking AV over IP, you're going to have to go with the highest bandwidth that you can afford, so that you eliminate that. But it's esports is going to be like constantly doing staging projects. AV staging projects, unless you build an arena. I don't think it's going to be a while before colleges will be building an arena. So you'll be using what exists. So it's like bringing in Elton John every few months to do a concert on your campus, right? Where you have to basically turn it into an arena. So the latency is a big issue there. And of course, having the relationships with whatever brands you decide to use for those image magnification is going to be key, because that's going to be the most expensive part.
Yeah, just as a sign of the times, here at Rutgers, we actually converted one of our bookstores on one of our campuses into an esports lounge. So that just shows how much that portion of what is a priority has now switched to the technology side of everything. So that's under development, and I'm not exactly sure of timeline, but I know that's coming out soon. So.
Yeah, we're currently converting 2 racquetball courts to an esports lounge. So
yeah,
well, there you go.
It's going to be quick. I think that it's not a giant market. Let's be honest here. It's not like you're going to be spending millions of dollars on this in a short period of time, but it's going to be driven by ESPN's rollout of their esports network, in my opinion, on the university campus. Because I don't know if we have anybody on who's representing a campus that has a Division I esports team, because that's new. But I know Ohio State, as I mentioned, Texas, Florida. There's some others. I think Minnesota is another one that has an esports team. But those schools would be much quicker to adopt this than most schools.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about those big schools that are like varsity level, but then of the hundreds of universities that have clubs that are just sitting there waiting for the opportunity. Actually, interestingly enough, when we were up at Marist for CCUMC this year, they have a club, an esports club and they have banners on the wall already, like for like their local tournaments that they've done and things like that. So they are like just on the edge of being ready to be of one of those bigger groups. So yeah, we're really pushing the edge of this right now.
Yeah, at the end of this next decade, you'll all have esports arenas of some type. Maybe not 15,000 people, but I think you'll all have more than a bookstore. I think it'll be a little bit more substantial than that. But I think that from a technological standpoint, the only thing that matters is the latency. Can't be any.
Yep. And what wonders then is how many of us as classroom support teams are ready to build that, or is it then something that is, that any normal arena builder would do, or is that where the athletics department would normally oversee those venues?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's part of this is a broadcast issue. I mean, a broadcast consultant or designer could handle a lot of pieces of this, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, remember the broadcast industry already has AV over IP. They do it uncompressed on fiber. They have 50 gig networks. It's a pretty common thing. So you're right. When you're talking about building an arena where you're going to be broadcasting it through ESPN, it's not going to be AV. It's not going to be SDVOE. I mean, as much as SDVOE would like to see that, it's going to be uncompressed 50 gig outside of that arena. Now, on the campus where you're broadcasting for everyone else to watch, you can pretty much use any of the AV over IP platforms.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Hey, Joe, I hate to cut this off, but I had only scheduled till 1:30, and I apologize if I was supposed to schedule till 2.
No, you're.
I didn't know I was supposed to go till 2, and I have to administer a test. So
give them all A's. No, all right. Hey, no, we thank you very much. I mean, Gary, this was fantastic, and we know that you have your pulse on our vertical, obviously living in it every day. And just anyone last final word here before you see you go bye-bye?
I mean, I'm readily available. You're welcome to contact me. I'm in my office here at UNC. It's not fancy, but I decorate it with Star Wars stuff because I'm a Star Wars geek. But I would certainly welcome anyone contacting me. You can contact me at my Rave Pubs address at just gary@ravepubs.com. Feel free to just send me an email if I can ever be of assistance support. I don't have anything to sell you, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. I answer emails on a daily basis for free from not just university communities, but other end users, because I love this industry and I love supporting the industry. Feel free to reach out to me if I can ever be of any assistance, or if I can connect you to some people that might give you more knowledge than I would have. But it's been an honor to be part of this. I love this because 5 years from now, I'll be able to look back and say I was on that first one because I love this. And I would go back to my initial challenge in that you should consider having some sort of a certification that's around those 3 pillars, right? The performance, efficiency, and simplicity. I think that's an area that you're sort of an expert on because you are dealing with presenters that are 25, well, actually, you could even argue 18 to 55, 60, 70 years old. And you have to be able to accommodate all of them. And those 3 things are really important. So I think you do have the ability to pull this off. And I would endorse it through our publication if you feel like that would help. And I'm certainly encouraging Scott to write about this. And I would support that as well. So thank you for your time. And I appreciate the invitation, Joe. And I appreciate you allowing me to hijack a session.
No, we loved it. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for all this. And
I appreciate it.
Great stuff.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
So that brings us to start to wrap up our inaugural HETMA virtual conference. I think we got a stamp of approval. And I think just the way the chat, the conversations, people who have been listening in, this was just really fantastic. I couldn't ask for more of the first year. And you kind of got a slow roll because you don't want to fall flat on your face. And I think that this was fantastic. As we kind of close up, let's just go around really quick. And just if everyone wants to just give your takeaway, your thoughts, and or direction, like what we're gonna, anything. And I'm going to leave it open for you. So Tim, I'm going to start backwards around my horn. Tim.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for chiming in, and thanks to all the rest of the steering committee up here, and thank you, Joe and BC. You guys have been great through all this. I am definitely looking forward to more conversations like this going forward. I think we've got something hot, and we really need to keep it going. So whatever that may look like, if it's monthly or more regularly, I think that's something we need to really explore. So I'm taking away that kind of like that energy I felt when I came back from CCUMC. Like I got to see all the people, and I got to meet all the people that were higher ed people just like myself, and it's like now I'm like, and this is like a good re-energizing that I needed right before we hit winter break. So ready for those winter projects. So it's looking good.
100%. Mr. Scott.
This is truly the first kind of virtual conference that I've taken part in, been part of webinars or the like. And it was funny. So last night I got home and I'm in my house and I'm like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I felt like really tired, and I thought, but the great thing is I get to sleep in my own bed, and I don't have to go out and eat for the third night in a row. So the other piece for me is seeing names in the chat of people that you've known for 10, 20 years, appearing in the chat and discussing things. And so surprising to me that the virtual conference kind of made those connections that often you think you can only get in person. So I'm really excited about the future of conferences like this. I'm always excited about how AV people are willing to step up and help each other. And I learned so much over these last few days, and kind of changed my thinking about a number of things. So I'm just excited and looking forward to what comes next.
Yep, 100%. All right, Mike.
Yeah. Again, want to thank everyone else for participating and for all those who attended. We had the attendee list was great, and we're so excited to have so many of you join us. I think one of the things that I'm going to really take away from this, is the hashtag in-house integrator. We always call ourselves that, but it was good for all of us to kind of collectively give that a thought, right? Oh, wait a minute. Yes, we all think of ourselves like that. And what can we do to leverage that, right? What can we do to better position ourselves in the industry, not as just the higher ed end users, but the higher ed in-house integrators? And I'll be curious to see where we can go with that. So,
yep. I love that. I think that, Scott, you were pushing that, and now it's taking it. In-house integrator. It's all rolling off our tongues. So perfect.
You have to catch yourselves on occasion, but more and more that comes off my tongue instead of tech manager.
That's what did I tweet yesterday? That do we already have to have a name change?
Yeah.
Higher education in-house in-house integrator alliance. All right, Jim, your final thoughts.
Oh, I thought this was great. I mean, it's a great opportunity to hear other people's perspective. I think we tend to do things in our own silos a lot, and we don't get out and see and hear what other people are doing and how they're thinking about, very similar problems that we all face. That's a super good opportunity. I'd also kind of have to give a shout out to the technology for this. I thought it worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually surprised.
You were surprised because right before we hit play, I was sitting here going, okay, how am I going to do this? Wait, who am I going to bring in out? All right. The first time we saw the hand raise, I went, okay, I think I can hit the allow to talk button. No, it did go. It was awesome. It was very, very smooth. I love it. Perfect. Donovan.
Nope.
See, right after we said the text went, we have to hold on, we're unmuting him.
There you are.
See, right after we said how great the tech was, we had to have a tech fail. It's perfect.
User error, like
that was
normal.
on cue. So, this has been a really good experience for me. I enjoyed working with all of you. I loved the chat and getting in to know some of these people that were on the chat. I've made a lot of connections offline since then, since this has started, reaching out to other people and having offline discussions. So I think that's been great. I'm looking forward to continuing on with this. I think that this should be, and we've got a lot of comments about this should definitely be again, and maybe twice a year and not just once, or maybe we do this, quarterly, or however we end up doing it. I think that we've started something that is really, really great. And this community has always been great to work with, and I really enjoy it. I hope people got out of it what I think was there and what I got out of it, which was a lot. So.
Yep. And I completely. And I sit there and think, we didn't know what this would be. Like, when you have ideas, and when BC and I'm going to go to BC next, is like, we talked about this, but when it doesn't exist, how do you know how it's going to work and what's going to happen? And we're all just sitting here, and just like what Scott said, you get home, I really, like, this year, it felt like an entire learning experience, connecting with our verticals so exactly into what we need every day. And the community that we've seen go through the chat and reach out is just been, again, you don't know what to think, that you're going to think about it and what the takeaway is going to be. But I would almost say completely, I want to say life-changing. And in the same way as to how I had, why did I start the podcast? It was to build community among one another. And we did that in a real tangible way with this. And I think we have a really, really bright future.
Also, we need to get the AV swag people on that hashtag in-house integrator t-shirts.
That's right.
There you go.
And speaking of hashtag, Chris Netto reminded me that we didn't create a hashtag for the conference. It was like, oh, I failed. So, next time we'll have an official hashtag. Yep. That's why you slow roll it, right? Well, BC, the idea that started months ago, we created Save the Date, pamphlets for our little cards, and next thing you know, here we are. So,
I mean, I'm extremely thankful to our steering committee for being an excellent resource and kind of throwing their hat into this unknown ring with us, not knowing what a virtual conference was even going to look like or turn out. They kind of took that leap, and I think it was fantastic, and very thankful for all the attendees. It's been very gratifying and humbling looking on social media every night at the response and how people are talking about this. And Joe, for you having the vision to see that this is a need in our vertical and in our industry. It's great because, a few years ago you'd be with an AV gathering and it would be kind of people would be kind of measuring egos back and forth. But this experience is exactly 180 from that. Everybody's talking and communicating and willing to help out and offer solutions and options. And it makes me very proud to be part of this industry. And I'm very excited to see kind of how we continue to grow this and become that resource that is definitely needed for us. Yep.
Wow. Total hashtag for the I completely agree. I'm so thankful to all the steering committee, and this is, I think, again, I keep coming back to BC and I having this conversation probably a year ago now about, hey, there's something missing in our organization. We don't know what it looks like, or in our industry, in our vertical. We don't know what it looks like, but we experienced a little bit of it when we were together as a community in Japan. How can we continue that? And I think this was the perfect example of it. So I thank you all. And every single person who was on, especially all the SMEs that we were pulled in. Oh my gosh. Is that crazy? We all learned a ton. And I know everyone in attendance did. And so, I just think, and kind of given the going forward, we have talked about continuing something like this on a monthly type of, let's call it a lunch and learn or something along those lines, and keeping these going on a regular basis, monthly. And of course, the best part, I love when Gary talked about a certification, because we've had that conversation. So I think we got the stamp of approval to go ahead and actually start pulling that together and work with our manufacturer partners for that. So that is fantastic. And everyone, these a lot of people put out, oh yeah, we have swag. We got to put a call out to swag. I'll put it, you can reach out. We send you some. Oh, Scott, you don't have any swag?
Oh.
I need it all. Not
God, we gotta fix that. We gotta fix that.
We'll get some swag out to you if you reach out. We can do that. So what we will be doing, we will be putting this on our YouTube channel. So thank you, Donovan, for getting that going. We'll have to get some. I'll send it out and get some subscribes so we can vanity the end of it there for us. But we'll be putting these out for people to watch as well. We're going to be hitting tons of different topics that impact our vertical. I think we nailed them. I think it's one thing I was thinking about. It's like, it's funny because 2 years ago, we probably would have been talking about wireless collaboration. And I don't think we've said the word until I just said it, right? I mean, so it's interesting how our vertical is continually changing and our needs are changing. And I think that's where we will continue to bring up these topics and finding the SMEs that are doing what we're doing at various institutions and just keep that going regularly. And probably we've talked about doing this a couple times a year. We'll work on, how we have to continue. We'll talk about changes. Reach out to us and let us know what no discussion. See, you had to go there. Let us know topics. We talked about doing this a couple times a year because we don't have to worry about booking hotels and flights. It's the cheapest conference you can ever run. So we love it. We'll keep that going. I guess this is our sign off, and time for me to go you get lunch and we'll do a real happy hour. So till next time, thank you everyone. We are just glad you attended. Do reach out. You can just do a general email is contact@hetma.org. And if you want to get more involved, and if you're especially manufacturers who want to get some partnerships going with us, as well as anyone from higher ed institutions who want to get involved, we're looking to grow, and everyone's specialties is, I think, what really made this, and everyone having, that's it. I'm going to quit talking. I think it's time for me to quit talking. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.